All right, so what I've done so far is I've loaded up the fresh project, the project 2, pretty much the third party template. Um, to make sure that the plugin is actually installed, if you go to edit plugins, you should see the RPG Engine Toolkit here. It should be enabled. Also, one thing that you want to enable as well is the Apex plugin, because I use the plugin in one of the blueprints to be able to do a destructible wall in a demo, and that's part of the toolkit. So if you don't have that enabled, if you try to play, it's going to give you an error about that object saying, "Hey, this plugin is, this blueprint has a compile error. Please fix it." And this would be the reason why. Once you enable this, it's going to ask you to restart your editor. I've already done that to save on time. So enable that, make sure your plug is enabled, restart the editor, and then you should be back here. I have saved the starting map as starting map. I deleted the default guy because he's not needed, and I've also created a empty area, empty space called title screen. By default, the system will see the fact that title screen is in the map that you're loading, and it will know to load the title screen. Now, one thing we do have to do as well is part of setting up. You have to pretty much tell the system that it's going to use the toolkit. To do that, you have to go here, click the drop down, and select RPG game mode. It may pause a little. I think it's because it's trying to do all kinds of lookups in the engine and things like that. But after that, it should put all your default here. Mind you, my base hero is part of the RPG Engine TK folder. So if you don't have that copied over from the demo project files, you'll have to put your own class in there. But if you do, it should automatically link up to the basic character class that's in that folder. And then after that is set, you have to go down and set your game instance, which would be what used to be the RPG party. It's now part of the game instance, which is just the RPG data manager in general. Now that is set. One thing you have to do is in each of the maps, do a game mode override to make sure that the level that you're working on does have the correct mode set to it. I don't think you have to do that, but I just do it out of paranoia to make sure that it's set. Same thing with my starting map. This override game mode is set in here as well. So now, once you create all of this, you should be at the step that I am right now. I pretty much copied over the RPG Engine system folder along with the default database from the demo project, as well as the RPG Engine TK folder that's from the demo project. This is just so doing this example will be a lot faster. One thing you will have to have is the RPG Engine TK folder in your content folder, as well as an actor folder, because that is what most of the class lookups use as their base path when it's trying to dynamically load the assets from the database. So if you don't have your class information and things like that in this directory, it won't be able to load that to be able to bring it into the system. So you're going to have to make sure that at least for your base class definitions, items, actors, and things like that, you may want to keep those under this folder structure. You can change it, but you will have to go everywhere I've dynamically loaded to make sure that it's looking in a different path wherever you want your path to be for all of your data assets, pretty much. So now when we play, we should get a pretty much a blank title screen. Nothing in this level, so there's nothing to load. You should be able to go and select your different options. There's no camera setups. There's nothing in this map, so it's not going to show anything but the pure it's not going to show anything but the pure UI at this point. That should get you started into however you want to set up your title screen and things like that. One thing we do want to do to be able to start in the actual game is set up our default map. So what we're going to do is come over here to levels, starting map, and in our starting map we want to place a starting point. Usually this is the default starting point for the most of the games, so I'm just going to delete that. And we're going to go down into the content browser under the RPGEngineToolkit. Again, if this isn't here, if you make sure that in your content browser you select show content, show plugin content, you'll be able to find this folder. And usually I turn off engine content unless I actually need something there because of the plethora of folders that will show up in this side panel. So if we come down here, we go in our blueprints, we go down to our props and our zones, and we should be able to drop down a waypoint. We want to give this waypoint a name. Alright, so we're going to call it starting point. I'm going to copy that. Since there's no level stream, even though that says level stream, that's supposed to be level stream. There's no level stream that right now that we need to load when we load here to this level, to this waypoint. So I'm not going to fill anything in that for right now. But if for some reason this waypoint required a level stream to be able to load before the system loads up, you can put that level stream name there. And I'm going to load up the database manager. So if you have the plugin and you need the database manager, which is pretty much everything you need to create and modify the database and the toolkit in general for any kind of data assets. If you go to the plugins folder, the RPGEngineToolkit, the EXTT folder, and then go to RPG tools, you should find the zip file for the database manager, and you can extract that. Once this is extracted, you should be able to go in here and load up the solution file. This is a C# application. I already have it open over here. This is a C# application that houses everything to be able to modify your game on the database side, at least. I have it already started up. In case you're not used to using it or anything like that, when you first open this, you should just be able to set this to release and hit the play button to compile the code to bring up the Toolkit database manager. I'm going to go to File, Load, and I'm going to load the database that we currently have. If you're starting up a new project and you're trying to create your own database, you just have to hit New Database instead of Load, and then make sure that your database is located within your project. Actually, I want to go to the right project, which is Project 2. You want to make sure that your database is inside of your content folder under RPG_system, under data store, and then it is saved out as source.rpgdb. So now that it's loaded, we can come over here to maps, and I already have a map saved, but this is the one for the demo, so I'm just going to make my a new one. Our level is a new region, So I'm going to add a new region here called starting map. Copy that. So now we should have starting map in our region if I'm clicking the right thing. So here we go, starting map. This will be the map that we have that we want to load. And then we want to make sure that we go to this waypoint, which is called starting point. If I can select. And we're going to put this in as the waypoint name. Again, if you have a level stream, you can put that level stream information here, so that way it knows that it needs to load a level stream before loading the character in. And I'm just going to save this out. I guess I have to put something in for the level stream, none, since I don't have one. Alright, so now we have our starting area, which is our starting map, and we have our starting point. So if we go to our init data, we should be able to select our starting map from here and save that to the initialization of the database. Now, one thing that we're also going to have to do is, if you can notice right here, we have actors that's going to be part of our party as soon as our game starts. If you're creating something new, you won't have this here, so you will have to come over here, go to classes, and create a class. When you create a class, you're going to have to give it a name, give its initial stats, of which you can see how the stats will, go up in level every time you level based on these natural logs that are right here in the database, in the drop down. And then with that, you can modify the power of the increment for that given stat, so you can make it, more aggressive as you level up, or less aggressive depending on the power level that you give to that stat. You will have to give it a link to the actual blueprint version of this class, which will give it, more definition to what this class is. Right now, you're just defining the stats, but for animations and things like that, you're going to have to specify your class link. So if we go over here to our RPGEngineToolkit folder, under Heroes, Data Files, and Class, we have Warrior. And you just copy the name of that, put it over here, make sure the _C is on there so it knows that that is the class that it needs to look up when it loads your system. It will properly link this blueprint to this actual class. Once that is saved, you need to create a actor, and with the actor you can give it a name. You can give it an actor link just like the class link that we just did. So if we go over here, we have warrior data that is also here with the _C. So that way it makes the connection between the database file and this blueprint file within our system. You can also give it a little bit more, you can give the actor a little bit more added stats. You can link it to the class, and you can link it to a starting weapon if you've created one before. You can also come over here and do simulations to see, versus whatever enemy type that you have, how your current, based on the current level of your character, how it will do in a fight versus the other enemy type. I'm going to go over this in general in another video, but I'm just trying to give just a quick overview of how to, get your initial character started and everything. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. Once you have an actor and a class, you should be able to be good to come over here to the initialization data and add that actor to your starting data. Now, to look at the actual data for that character, we're going to go to the actor class first. Alright, for our actor, we have a list of meshes in case your character has multiple tiers of characters. So like uh, the starting outfit for the game, or a winter outfit, or what have you for your game. You can have multiple instances of a character mesh in here for a base outfit or a base look for your character. Where your armor is just something separate to be able to put on your character if you have visual armor. But by default, you can just use the base entry in here for your base character. Um, you have the billboard images that will show up in the different areas of the toolkit, from the character dialogue to the emoticon for basic dialogue. The character billboard is what's going to show up. Well, actually, I'm not using the character billboard, but in dialogue, if you say that, hey, I want this character to show up, almost like in a date sim kind of way, that's what the character billboard is set up for. I'm not using that anywhere in the examples, but that's what this is for here, so you can be able to load character billboards into the dialogue system if you want. And then we have the party icon that's going to show up in the start menu, and the party icon that's going to show up when you go into battle. As for the classes, I believe I went over this in another video, but here's where you link to your actual animation class for this class type. You can set that class's movement speed here, as well as the animations that it will use for that class. So now that that is set up for all your animations that you want to use for that class, and the actor that will be using that animation, you should be able to, if I can figure out how to go back to the title screen. One thing we're going to have to make sure is, before we play, we need to make sure that the database manager is closed, because otherwise, if you're still editing the database while it's trying to load, it's just going to, when you hit play and you hit the start of the game, it's going to load to a blank screen. So if that happens, you'll probably have an error somewhere in your output log that will say something about not being able to load the database. But it should show up somewhere in here. It should be a line that says cannot access database or something like that, or cannot load database. If that happens to you, that would be the reason. So now we should be able to play. Hit start our journey. And now it'll load us with whatever actor that we set for the main party member. It'll load it in here. It'll load their weapons. It'll load their current armor if they are set up to start with armor. If they're set up to start with weapons in general. If they don't have a weapon, then it won't load. But it's going to use the default mesh in the mesh list, and then load that actor into the scene. Now, one thing that we can't do is we can't move around. We can't do pretty much a lot of different things because we don't have the input information added to this project. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to come over here to the other project that I compiled earlier, and this is pretty much the demo project. If we go to the project settings, we should be able to export the input information. I'm just going to put that on my desktop. Alright, so that's the input. We're going to export the Navmesh settings, the Navmesh navigation system settings, and let's see. There should be one more thing we have to do. The input, the navigation. We already set up the mode, so we technically don't have to set up the mode. But you could export the mode if you want to. It just makes it to where you don't have to put in all this information or set up the title screen as your default. And I do believe that is all that we actually need from here. Are there specific packaging settings? Let's see. There's one thing that you will want, because this part is the packaging information for saving out, or should I say packaging your game. It's going to have to manually bring in the RPG engine system. So you would want to export this as well to be able to bring into your project. So that way when you publish your project, it will publish the RPG_system folder and bring all the files over that it needs to be part of the release build in general. Now that we have this, I'm going to minimize this for right now. We'll be back to this in a few. And I'm going to import all that information over here into this project. And I should just be able to go through. Let's see. I'm just bringing in each one of these. Import. Navigation. Navmesh. And then the input. So now we have everything in here. If we go to input, we should see all of our information that we want here. One thing to note, actually, hold on, let me check one thing real quick. Just because I'm paranoid because Unreal changes their setup every time. Okay. So I'm glad I checked that. Before, you didn't have to be on the page to load the settings in, but now it looks like you do have to be on this page to actually import the INI file. So let's go to the proper page and import the information for the proper page. So this one is Navmesh. Let's go here to the navigation system. I did the inputs, the packaging settings, import that. And then you can do our modes, but we already set up the mode. The only thing we haven't done is set our title screen up as the default starting level. And that should be it, really. Just make sure that your inputs are here. You should see these here, not just the basic default stuff. One thing I found out is the INI files have to come from the same version project that you're exporting and importing into. I'm assuming because sometimes when they go between different versions of the engine, some of these, the information and the formatting in the INI changes. So just note that when you're doing your export and import, that the demo is at the same version that you're trying to import it into. So now we should be able to come back here. Start the game. And now we should be able to move around. Note, I'm using a controller for most of my inputs and things like that. So from the jump and the run and everything, I'm using a Xbox controller. I do have some of the keys set up for the actual keyboard, but a lot of my inputs are bound to the actual Xbox controller. So that's something that you can change however you want to change them inside of both the input section that we just imported stuff into and the bindings that is inside of the actual base hero. So if we go up here to the control operations, these are the input bindings that I'm bringing stuff in from. And these are everything I bind for, you know, moving up, down, left, right. And pretty much I have the gamepad set up in here. So any of the operations that you want a keyboard to actually operate, you can bring in the input for the keyboard here, or create a custom event to be able to drive these however you want to either modify this character base, or if you have your own setup, then you can use that however you want. But now this is pretty much the basis of everything. We have the character in, we can move around, we can double jump. I can bring over open the inventory, equipment, and I can leave the game. This error right here that happens every time, it seems to change depending on what engine version that we're in. If we just click on this real quick, right here, I try to, in some cases the engine tries to preload a character or a default base character object into the system, and the way the system is set up, I want to make sure it's deleted before we recreate one, to be able to say, hey, we want you to use this character as defined by this class operation, and I try to destroy it here. In the next release, this will be taken care of, but for right now, to get rid of that error from showing up every time, just do is valid check. And this will make sure that you don't get that error. So unless it's valid, we don't delete it. And this should take care of you of that annoying error that you'll see from using the toolkit. Sorry about that. I try to capture every single little avenue of any kind of caveat before release, but this is just one of those that got through the loop. But you should be able to make that change, and then that error will go away from your testing and your version of the plugin. So now we can load back up, start a new level. And there we are. We're in. You can now start prototyping your world, dropping in NPCs, creating events with the data manager, with the database manager, and things like that. I'm going to go through some of my videos to see which one of them are still good enough to be able to teach the essence of the system, but a lot of them I'm probably going to redo this weekend whenever I get time, and slowly try to build up all the videos to cover everything in the system. Again, the system is pretty bloated with a lot of different things everywhere, and there's a lot of little things to learn. If you look through the documents, you can get some good ideas of how the system works with that, but I'm also trying to bring these videos together to just make sure that everything is covered. If there's something that anyone doesn't understand, make sure you send me a message on Facebook or email me or anything like that, and I can look into it. If I didn't cover it in a good way, I can redo videos and things like that to see if I can get it to a good understanding. Again, feedback is important to me, really important, so that way I can make everything as easy and understandable for everyone if I can. Have a good one.